Welcome to Evolve Your Blueprint,
where we explore the concept of evolving
and discuss our journey as individuals from diverse cultural backgrounds.
Our mission is to bring real conversations,
relate through storytelling,
and empower you to evolve with us. Let's evolve together.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Evolve Your Blueprint, where today we're going to be talking about balancing hustle and healing. How does it fit in your life? How do you know when to go and when to slow down? So we got to start by first asking, what does hustle mean?
It's so interesting. So the word hustle actually comes from this Dutch word, which means to toss, to shake up, which I found really interesting. Because growing up in a BIPOC household, it often means to like move quickly or to do something in a pretty urgent pace. And so a lot of times it was a side hustle that was instilled in me in a really young age. But when we think of that root word, to shake, to toss, like it's just something is done really quickly. I think that when we think of just the nature of like, even with children, right? Like they have a toy and then they're shaking or they're tossing, they're doing it so quickly. And so in a lot of ways, how have our communities had to move really quickly to keep a roof over their head or food on the table? And sometimes it's doing things that, you know, maybe are not the first choice or their interest, but is done in such a quick manner to gross a profit so that we can keep a roof over our head, to keep food on the table.
Even those words, right? Toss and shake. Like there's moments of hustle that I feel like can shake things up. Things can be shaken up, right? And then we realize that the hustle can do more damage sometimes and we might need to slow down. So there's components to that. But being children of immigrants, how does that even the hustle impact the way we hustle, right? Impact us.
It's almost this like mandatory, right? Like when I think of hustle, it's like, oh, chambear, you got to work. You have to like work really hard. And it's a very automatic thing, right? I think it's just very ingrained, at least growing up for myself, that was just expected to do, right? If you weren't working or trying hard, then, you know, something wasn't right. You know, so when I think of hustle, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. It's like working hard, and then what else could you be doing? Whether that be in like, you know, financially, right? With job-wise, like, hey, hustle, got to make more money, got to do this, got to do that to survive, to pay bills. But even if it's at home, like, all right, what are you doing at home? You know, it's like weekend mornings we're like, all right, listening to Juan Gabriel and like cleaning, right? Like that was a hustle apparently, right?
Yeah.
We're like, you know, oh my gosh. But yeah, it's this thing of working. In other words, going.
Yes. And even as you were sharing cleaning, right? Like at such a young age, like Sunday mornings, it's like get up and clean the house. Like you got to work.
I do
hard.
that now. I'm in my señora era. You know, that's what I do on the weekends now.
Yeah.
But what's the playlist though?
Depende. Maybe we're gonna be like Vidi, where she plays Celine Dion one moment and then she gives us rappers at the end. But
Some bachata and some banda
some
coming in.
banda, some Selena. Yeah, you know, amiga, as you were saying about, you know, your definition of hustling and chambear and things like that. I also think that, you know, when I think of the word hustle, I was kind of thinking about how to hustle, I can hear my mom say tienes que ser movida, like, you know, you have to be moving, kind of like, you know, and that's also something that is praised. I think to be una persona que es movida, it's like somebody that's sharp, somebody that kind of gets at it, you know. And I think hustle, I don't know that it's really something that's taught. I think to your question, Vidi, about being children of immigrants, it's just what you watch, it's what you see, you know. It's
modeled.
It was modeled.
It's what's modeled. Or
Or
even on a day off, like I always tell my mom, like, can you relax? Like she's always doing, you know, even if it's a day off where we're supposed to just be hanging out, chilling, you know, she'll grab the mop or, you know, sweep and whatever. And so it's always kind of go. And I think it's in our blood, I think, in some ways.
DNA.
Yeah, it's in our DNA to hustle, to get at it.
I think that when we look really deep at it too, it's in our DNA, but it's also like this unwritten message. It's like we have to prove that we deserve to take up space, or like we're important in some manner. So I think of in the household, same thing in my household. Like you show that if you're able to hustle, you're able to show like your worth to the family and take up space. And how do we generalize that out and even to the workplace? of like we're taught we hustled in our prior jobs as well as now to show that we are worthy to some degree. We deserve to take up space.
That's such a good point. That piece, and I love how you're breaking that down. It's modeled. It's kind of shown every day. Every day. My dad was worked in construction growing up, and I remember like my brother and I being kids, like probably like 10, and we would every weekend we would go to work with him. Like even if we were like just stand there, right? Like he'll be like asking for a tool, and my brother and I would have to go to the bucket or to like the toolbox to grab the tool and take it to him, right? And I remember I would just even with my cousins too, because my uncles, his brother would do the same or similar work, and we would literally just go there and like, especially during the summers, and it was like we're like 10, 11. How much help were we actually providing, right? Like when you think of it, right? But going back to what we saw growing up, it was very much modeled and instilled at a very young age. Like, this is what you do. If my brother and I didn't have a soccer game to go to, then you're going to go to work with your dad. And it was expected that my dad worked essentially every weekend, aside from his like 9 to 5, Monday to Friday job. And it was very normalized. It was just a thing to do. It wasn't nothing out of the blue. Don't get me wrong, it would be annoying, right? Because I wanted to stay home and chill. But of course, that really wasn't even an option. It was just kind of that's what you did.
In our household, there was no sleeping in, even to this day. I think that now I'm like that, and my husband's like, can we just sleep in? But there's like this restlessness in me now, and I think it's because growing up, sleeping in was like, it's 8 a.m. and it's like, you really slept in. Andale, come on. Now you'd hear my mom, ya está la comida, like come and eat, And my sister and I would be like, oh my gosh, like we just wanted to chill and relax. But now I'm the same way. And you know what, right now when you're talking about your dad and going to work with him, it brought me back this memory, and it's pretty cool because I think in our family it's 2 girls, so it's my sister and I, and my dad worked as a roofer. And I think one of the cool things about my dad is that there's never been a limit on what we as women can do. And this is maybe, I don't know, like 10 years ago or so. So I was grown, ya adulta. And I remember there was a weekend where he was going to go do a roofing job. It was like just his side hustle. And I was like, oh, I'll go with you. Because he didn't have I don't know if it was like he didn't have a worker or something like that. And I was like, I'll go with you. He was like, yeah, you'll come with me? And I was like, yeah, I'll go. And I remember that, 2 things happened. One, my dad was like, oh my God, Kaylee. He told my mom, Kaylee's bossy. She was telling me how to do roofing after I've done it for, years and years and years. And then I was like, well, there was an easier way to do it, Dad. And he was just like, oh my God. But the other thing was that it really made me, I've always respected the work that, our parents do out in the sun. It's really hard work. But I think that day doing it, I was like, wow, he does this all day long in the heat because, we're from the desert. So in the summers, it's 120 degrees. But I don't know, I think it just made me remember that and how hustle, it's instilled. It's something that's praised. But I think sometimes hustle comes from a space where we don't get to choose it. For many people, there's no choice. You have to do it because that's what you got to do, period. But I think for us, as children of immigrants, it's kind of finding that balance of, do we have to keep hustling in the same way? Because for some folks, it's no hay de otra, there's no other way. But for us, it's almost like, well, can we cool it? Can we relax for a second? And what's the difference? For those who feel like I have to hustle because I can't do anything else. That's just what I got to do to make ends meet. Versus that hustle instilled in us and feeling like, it's just us. It's our restlessness.
Like survival.
Yeah. And so I don't know what's y'all's relationship right now with hustle?
There's 2 things that come to my mind as you were talking. For me is unlearning that response. Like there's been this unlearning of narratives of that's not my narrative. I don't have to work twice as hard anymore. So there's been this unlearning process for me. And with that, knowing that I have a choice. That there's now, because of their hustle, because of them now here, and they were able to give me a better life. Now knowing that I have a choice and how do I want to respond differently, and knowing that I'm worthy of not like really putting myself to like that hustle constantly going because it has impacted me in other ways of like health, and just my relationship with myself, right? So there's two parts, the unlearning part and then knowing that I have a choice and knowing more of those narratives that come with it. As you were talking, those are the two things that came to my mind. Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, I think about a lot of my clients who primarily are children of immigrants, and, you know, sometimes it's almost the body, it's what the body says versus what our head's saying, right? And that disconnect, right? So sometimes we're like, I know that, you know, it's okay if I take a vacation, or it's okay if I take a day off. Cognitively, I know that, but internally and with my body, physically, there's a disconnect there. And so even, you know, working, lately I've been doing more brain spotting, and it's been really, really cool to kind of have, you know, brain spotting, really what it is you sitting. It's literally pausing, and there's not really a whole lot of dialogue. And so I think it really helps people understand, like, where in my body am I feeling this discomfort with even just sitting in this hour that I know is with you as a therapist. It's my therapy hour. What's coming up for me, and how does this also resemble another moment in my life when I'm trying to relax and I just can't? Cognitively, I know my body's having a hard time.
With hustle, I think for me, has varied in different parts of like my career and kind of just my life. I think there is also a very real, when you brought up unlearning, I think there's still a very real part of me that carries messages. I think, being a male figure, it's what my dad has taught me with my uncles, my grandfather. Like, it was like work, right? That's how you, a lot of this I do with the clients. I see this role that has not only was modeled for you, as expected of you, and kind of you just learn to do. And there's a certain type of maybe like masculinity tied to it, of being the provider and being a hustle, and work. I think there is a part of even an identity of it, to your point of unlearning. And so I go through different phases of that in my life, where am I leaning more into that part of my identity of being like a provider and working and embracing that part of myself, and then other times where it's maybe I'm crossing over into an area where it's more automatic and not so much mindful, and that's when I notice I get in trouble. And then I notice my health starts to kind of fluctuate. I'm like, oh, what's going on here? So that's kind of the ongoing kind of thing for me for hustle. It's like, I think this is a good example. Like, we all have practices. We're all super busy. We, group practices, having associates, etc. And then we're like, okay, let's start a podcast.
¿Qué más? What else can we add to our plate that's already full?
How much more on the head is that? So like that's exactly, I think, the point where so it's like, and going back to when we first started with the podcast, right? That was one of my first things that I think I shared with you. My hesitation is time.
Yeah.
Like, are we gonna have time to really do this? And thankfully, we've made time.
Yes.
Which is a whole other thing, right? But yeah, so to the question of like, what's my role with hustle right now? I think it varies through my life, but what's helped me is as long as I stay mindful of those layers that really make up the hustle for me.
As you're talking, Alejandro, I can't help but think of like, you're really redefining what hustle means in a lot of ways, of like being like that shake and toss, which we talked about originally, to becoming something that fits you better. You use the word like making time. You make time for other things outside of work. And so self-care almost becomes a part of your definition of hustle. I think even as today, as we do have filming days, there's a piece of self-care that's ingrained in these long days of like going to lunch together, like poking fun at one another, here and there. And so we have all these moments. And when I think of like my father too, also in construction, like labor work is hard. You're in the sun all day, you're physically drained, and we're able to work really hard here, but we're also able to step out for a little bit, recharge, and then come back in. Of like, that's a so much healthier version of hustle.
As you're sharing, what kind of came to mind is that, my relationship to hustle also depends on who I'm hustling with. And so this is what I mean, or this is what I'm talking about. What I mean by that is, I think in, like, for example, when I do business with Brandon, right? And so I feel like in our business, I think I do a lot of like, hey, let's pump the brakes, because I think I don't know, that's just my who I am. I am able to do that. Whereas like my amigo is like go, 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 go all the time. And so I think that we kind of do this like push pull. And then in like my marriage, I think about, you know, with my husband, you know, I feel like he's always hustling, and I worry about his health a lot. You know, I almost feel like I'm more attuned to, is he okay? Like, are you good? You know, and I think there in seeing, I think maybe it's because it's my marriage, it's different than like a business, right? But like within my marriage, I sometimes feel like I see him working so hard, and I want to kind of step up in the same way. And so it's almost like within our business, I'm like, yo, let's slow down, Brandon. And in my marriage or at home, I'm like, maybe I need to do more, because I'm seeing my husband do so much. And I'm proud of him, but also I'm like, dang, should I step up more so he doesn't have to do so much? Like, what's going on? You know, so I think my definition with hustle, it depends on who I'm hustling with. I think like, you know, what came up is, as I was mentioning, like I get worried about my husband, like, are you good health wise, is what can happen to all of us and to the listeners. You know, if you are in this kind of go, go, go mentality, right? Whether that was ingrained in you, that's just what you gotta do. There are real things that can happen when we don't tune in and we just kind of keep going, including, you know, burnout. You know, I think burnout is kind of like this more trendy word these days, but I think, you know, burnout has happened for a long, long time, because burnout can look like a lot of different ways. It can look like exhaustion. It could look like lack of motivation, lack of purpose, irritability, you know, annoyance, or also, you know, there's also the health, your health can be compromised. And so I do think it's important to understand your own relationship with hustle and flow, meaning like slowing it down. But yeah, I don't know what comes up for all of you, as I just mentioned that, because on the other side of hustle is burnout too.
I feel like my relationship with just hustling has evolved as I've gone through a lot of death and rebirth cycles, is what I call my spirituality part of life.
Tell us more about that. Death and rebirth cycles. What are we talking about? I love, by the way, everybody, like I love learning from VD, just because I think it's cool. You know, we all have our own beliefs, and I always find it fascinating to learn about how you perceive things. So tell us and tell me and tell the audience, or the listeners, like, what does that mean?
I think overall, with regards to just life, we constantly are in this cycle within ourselves and exterior, if we're aware of it or not, subconsciously or consciously. Okay. But I feel that we all go through a rebirth and death cycle of part of ourselves. So if it's either in our personal life or professional life, like I'll tell you about a professional part of my life, me leaving and choosing to leave school-based mental health of 10 years and choosing to go into private practice. There was a part of me that needed to die and needed to be left behind in that 9-to-5 hustle, and go into private practice. And there was this rebirth that I experienced going into private practice. So there's always a part of us that we need to let go of and we need to release, even in the hustle, because that doesn't belong to us. Or it was a narrative that was learned by our parents, that was modeled, right? So there is this process of letting go and releasing, this unlearning, if you want to call that too, the unlearning of releasing and letting go, so that you can bring in this new version, this rebirth of yourself that's more in alignment and that fits, just like how Alejandro kind of visioned it and explained it earlier, right?
Can I ask you a question? With that framework, how often are people having deaths and rebirths? You know what I mean? Like, and then also for folks who you know, subscribe to that framework, right? How would someone know they're getting close to a death? I guess that's what you call it.
It's a lot of self-reflection.
And needing a rebirth.
Yeah.
Like
It's a lot of self-reflection and awareness is what I see with regards to you being open to this perspective. And it can be micro moments, but it can be like big moments too, like the one I just explained. Like motherhood is a big rebirth and death cycle, because there's a part of you that's going to end, and there's a new part of you that is going to come with being a mother.
Interesting.
So that within itself, there's a death and rebirth cycle. So those are major moments, right?
Yeah.
Like graduation, marriage, right? Becoming a mother. Like
Breakups.
they're life transitions.
Okay.
They're life transitions,
So
right?
kind of every life transition,
Yeah.
you're imagining it as like every life
transition,
transition is a
death
death and
and
rebirth,
birth cycle.
new version of you. Interesting.
They're just life transitions, and they're decisions. And then if you're aware of internal what's happening within yourself that you need to release, because when you really think about these life cycles and these transitions, you do feel like a different person. There is a new level of you. There's new expectations, new seasons of life, in marriage too, right?
A ver, guys, how do you all see these transitions or thresholds, if you will, in hustle? Because we got our girl over here talking about death and rebirth. What about all of you? What about both of you?
How do you guys see
Yeah,
it?
how do you see it?
I think, well,
He's like, go ahead, go ahead.
thanks.
You first.
To piggyback off of what Vivi's saying, like
yeah.
these thresholds, I see it as like we're leveling up.
Yeah.
That if I'm able to hustle to a certain level, I can evolve to a certain level where I am actually able to become like the next version of myself. And so if I use work as an example of like, if I push myself to a certain degree once again, within the boundaries of not burning myself out physically or mentally, I am able to get to this next place where I'm able to see things from a different perspective. I'm able to make new connections. And once again, this isn't a journey I go on alone. I go on it with other people, or I have other people already in that next threshold that I'm going to join, just as like we're all here today. Because who I was coming out of graduate school is very different than the person that I am today. And I think there was a lot of hustling that had to happen in order to get there. So death and rebirths in a lot of ways to get to that.
You know, it's that hustle, the rebirth is like, the way I'm looking at it is also, it tells you something, right? When you're starting to feel that burnout, or when you're starting to feel those symptoms like the irritability, the exhaustion, the dehydration, like what's going on? Why am I, irritable, so irritable? Why can't I sleep very well? My sleep, all these like very somatic things in our body that our body tells us when we're reaching that threshold of burning out. It's information, right? And to kind of the next transition in your life, right? If the message is there every day, right? It's like almost like something telling you, what are you going to do, right? Are you going to go to the next level? Are you going to leave DMH or mental community mental health or whatever, right? Whatever it is in your life, but it's gives you an opportunity for I think myself still to make that decision to do something else with it. But it very much is the urgency that's created for you to do something with it. Are you going to embrace this next level in your life, or are we going to stay there, right? Granted, that can vary with wherever you are in life, but I think at the heart of it, it gives you at least information.
Yeah. And with me currently, just so I can tell the viewers a little bit more, just with regards to me going through a threshold right now where I had to release control, essentially. I left my apartment because I was exposed to mold toxicity in the apartment that I was living, and I had to immediately leave, but I had to release control of where I was going next and lean into people like my family, where sometimes I am very hyper independent and I had to also let go part of that identity and receive help from them, and leaning into them for support, and living with my brother currently and not rushing or trying to figure it out and hustle into finding a new place, right? And just taking a pause, taking like a minute to slow down. And that was hard to make that decision, because I was just like, no, I have to figure it out. Like I figure everything out, right? I have to do it. Like I just have to find a new place. But I'm like, I don't have to. Like this have to part of this narrative, I had to let that go. And I had to just take a pause and see what was in front of me, which was my siblings offering their space to me. And I had to release control, honestly, and let that go and just be okay with receiving. And now being where I'm at, which I'm with my brother, and I'm in this rebirth cycle right now and figuring out, where do I go next, right? And I'm in this transition in my life right now. And it's scary when you're in it because you can feel like you're a hot mess. But I feel like things need to fall apart so that you can come back together. And that is that rebirth cycle. And I'm letting go of even this hustle mentality right now as well.
It's cool to hear, you know, everybody's take, you know, because I think, you know, listeners may jive with, you know, one of our perspectives versus more of another, right? But I don't know, as I hear all of you, I really think that I view identity or this hustle or this threshold as a continuum. And I think that's part of actually something that I'm struggling with navigating my relationship with hustle, because I think of it as a continuum. Like, I think my past or my upbringing is a lot of what drives or taught me hustle. And so I don't necessarily see it as like different versions. I see it more as like I'm a continuum of that. But I also think that one of my struggles right now is that I'm thinking also about the next version of me, I suppose, like on the continuum. And so I think about, you know, in the future when I have a family and things like that. And so I almost feel like in the present moment, I'm grinding and hustling so hard, because the way that I'll justify it is I'll go, well, right now it's just me and my husband and our dog, and I have the time and I have the capacity. So you know what? I'm going to grind because I know that later on, whether it's by choice or just my priorities are going to change, I'm going to be able to reduce this hustle, or I'm going to need to, because there's going to be somebody else eventually, right? Hopefully, that, you know, we are going to need to tend to. And so it's not just going to be hustle, but I do think that it's a struggle because it kind of sometimes goes against the things that I teach, you know, a lot of this unlearning piece, it almost, so it's kind of not black and white. And it's one of those things that it depends on the day. Sometimes I feel like I do well in just slowing it down or tuning in, or hold up, like I'm acting in a space of like a different version of me that knew this wasn't what was gonna be helpful, right? Kind of like you're mentioning. But also sometimes it's kind of also the way I see it as it's practical. It's kind of like what I gotta do. But I don't know if that resonates with anybody else on just your dynamics with hustle and yeah.
It's kind of, it's that thing of like where does it fit now in your life today, right? How it fit maybe when I was new, that, oh, this is what it was to go to work on every weekend even though you're 10, right? It's like so like now, where does it fit now in my life in 2025?
Oh, we're gonna say something? Go for it.
Go for it.
You go.
I like to think that as we get more experience in life, we work smarter, not harder. Because in your phase, I've had the honor to see you in different phases of life. And before we went into private practice, I felt like you're at a similar kind of part in your continuum of like,
Tell me more. Okay, hold up, psychoanalyze me.
I have this potential opportunity set in front of me. It's scary. It's so unknown. But you took everything you knew from your prior portion of your life and applied it to that big jump to private practice. And the same as you'll do from being married right now into parenthood eventually. Same type of transition you'll eventually make. But I think, as VD said, it's that discomfort that's so difficult. And when we have discomfort, we go back to old habits. And old habits are a lot of time, oh, let me just kind of grind and, you know, get through what I need to do. But having community like this, we get challenged. So we got to make shifts as needed.
I guess I think the other thing that comes to mind is sometimes, I don't know if you all feel this way, or have ever felt this way. Maybe you don't have to feel this way right now, but like and I see this also in clients, is sometimes it feels like we're all just grinding, but then you have to ask the question, what am I hustling for? Like, what is it that I'm chasing here? You know, because, and I actually was having this conversation with my husband the other day, and we were just kind of reflecting, and he was telling me, you know, we work so hard because we're like, okay, like, you know, we're gonna work really hard so we can go and do these vacations, so we can buy a home, like all these things, right? But then it's like, we're hustling so hard, we don't go take that vacation. And so sometimes it's like, are we just staying busy and not really keeping our eye on what is this all for? Because I think we can get stuck in that cycle of grinding. Again, to go back to like, I'm thinking about a different season of my life that isn't even here, you know? But what am I missing out right now for thinking so far ahead too, you know?
We're not living in the present.
Híjole,
We're
andamos
not,
mal.
and that is exactly what I'm realizing right now. Like, I am not living in the present, and what's happening in my life is forcing me to live in the present by not going to wherever I'm supposed to be or trying to figure out where do I live next, right? I feel like there's a purpose for this in my life, and it is slowing me down, and I am getting uncomfortable. And it is very discomforting in my body. Sometimes I feel like off. I feel like a mess. I'm all over the place, questioning, and it's okay. And I have to tell myself that. So, yeah, I just feel that sometimes it's just messy, and you know, and we're not living in the present. So this is forcing me to be present right now.
Sí.
Because I'm such a planner. And I have like the next step. Like, I know, like, this is what I've been telling.
It didn't go according to plan.
Yeah. So like, literally, I've been saying this a lot to many people. Like, I usually know where I'm going next. I know where I want to go. Like, I usually have like a plan, but right now I don't. I really don't. And this is forcing me to be present. And I am going through that threshold, and it's stopping me to think and change my perspective on even how I hustle, how I run business. It's restructuring, essentially.
You know, your life has definitely kind of made you, right?
It made me, yeah.
And I will say that you made that mindful choice to look at life and be like, okay, this is what's happening, versus continuing the hustle even while, you know, because what if you didn't leave your apartment and you're like, no, whatever's come, I'm too busy to worry about that. I'm just gonna like endure and push through and kind of just,
right.
Who knows, right?
As soon as I knew that it was impacting my health and how I was feeling, I'm like, I need to leave. And I made that decision. And I had, thankfully, am very blessed to have friends and family that have been very supportive along the way and offered me support, right? And now it's like, okay, I'm temporarily here with my brother, and half my closet is at my parents', and then the other half is where I'm at. But I'm like, okay, then what do I do? You know? So I've been going within my body, like, and listening to myself.
You know, I hear you share that, and I can't think about my parents, right?
Yeah.
You know, going back to, you know, they're both immigrants to this country, and it's like the question of what is your hustle, like why are you hustling for? Their answers would be very different than I think mine, or I'm sure all of ours, right? Because it was a totally different set of circumstances, and I think that's a big piece of this, of why the unlearning piece, or maybe the integrating piece, maybe another way of saying it, is so important here. Because I could imagine my dad, if I would ask him that, like, hey, Dad, why did you work so hard? Why did you have to have so many jobs? And he'll be like, well, to make sure you guys like had food, or make sure you guys had clothes, or make sure you were able to play soccer if you wanted to, right? And like, you know, such amazing sacrifices that they both made, which is, you know, part of the gratitude and the appreciation I have of, and I think for a lot of immigrant families and children of immigrants, I think that appreciation and that gratitude is very much there, right? Or it should be there. And then when it gives us the opportunity to have this type of discussion of like, hey, where is that balance, right? Because for them, that marker of what the balance is far, far different. Unfortunately, the body does keep the score, So the body does remember our hustle, and that doesn't mean that our parents that work so hard don't have the effects of hustling, right? The somatic stuff, the blood pressure, the somatic things like you were sharing here. So I think that's kind of what I think it's. I'm always trying to like gauge here is like the messages that I taught that I was shown, and then the appreciation and gratitude I have that now I can actually have more time to be more in the present. And that's not that it's easy by any means, my gosh, but it affords me that capability to take a step back and look at that, which is kind of why I think we chose a lot of this topic.
You know, all of this has me thinking about how sometimes people will say, or at least people, me, will say like the most important thing is health, right? Because without health, what do we have? It's hard, right? But then it's like, we won't take the steps to try to address the health, right? Sometimes addressing your health does look like slowing it down, or whether, and health is such a vast thing, right? Whether that's your physical health, your mental health. So it's like, we say these things like, health is everything or the most important thing, but then we may not all be taking those steps to really act on it. It's just a saying until you don't have a choice. And that's unfortunately what I see with a lot of immigrants, and children of immigrants, is that it's not until there is a medical issue that it will be enough to stop or slow down. And we got to change that. We really do. I think if we have the privilege to be able to slow down, I think, dang, y'all, maybe it is our duty to do that.
I think partly what makes it hard is that we live in a society that's so that drives us to push ourselves and kind of almost ignore our health in some ways. Yeah. I think of organizations or corporate settings where you have hourly pay and you have salary pay. Salary pay is great, like if you don't have a lot of work to do, but if you do, you're working 60, 70 hours for a set amount of pay. But there's also this notion of we're sold of like, oh, do extra so that you can prove that you can get a promotion or whatever, but you do it for free in a lot of ways. And how much does that kind of counter like this piece of like, oh, we need to be aware of our physical and mental health. So we're working against a huge system here, which is difficult, but we try. One conversation at a time, but hopefully for next generations.
That's the piece. We try so much that we compromise, whether it be our health, whether it be like our spiritual health, if you will, our own integrity. There's this, during the pandemic, I first heard this phrase in the hospital setting called moral injury. Have you heard of that? This moral injury.
Moral injury.
Yeah, like when you're compromising part of your like internal belief system to help others, right? It was very popular with I worked at a medical corp thing before this, and it was a very common. It was talked about, a lot during the pandemic, because a lot of first responders were asked to do very difficult things, right? And it was damaging or impacting a lot of their just internal beliefs, their system of how to care for patients, with the lack of protection and all that was happened back then. But that idea, I think the premise still exists, is we work so hard, we compromise ourselves, and now we're left with this moral injury. And how do we when we talk about burnout, that weighs a lot with burnout. That weighs significant, because now not only are you physically exhausted, but morally you feel just burnt out, and that sometimes can be so much more intense.
And in our field, right, it kind of is like it's like this push-pull thing, right, where it's like we want to be there for our clients, and sometimes it's also the system that we're a part of that. I think it changes, or it can change, right, when you go off on your own. But I think that, you're working really hard with a high number of clients, because that's just how it works. But then there's this other part of, what about us, and how are we showing up as providers, right? If we're not taking care of ourselves, then there's like an ethical responsibility for us to be good too, if we're going to go and hold space for people. Not that our lives have to be perfect to hold space, but that moral, ¿cómo dijiste?
Injury.
That moral injury, are there any moral injuries that we're navigating, and are we addressing those, or are we just going, you know? Hence the burnout. I think that's why in our field we talk so much about burnout,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right? It's kind of like that moral injury.
As you were talking, Kaylee, I remembered I had a supervisor that would always say, you have to know how to do the dance. That push and pull that you say, right?
What are the moves, girl?
The steps.
What are the steps?
So she would just say that as a metaphor of like, you got to learn how to do the dance.
Yeah.
Right. And at times I'm like, well, I don't want to dance there. Like, I don't want to dance here anymore. You know, like I'm done.
That's a good point.
And that always stayed with me, like learning how to do the dance when you're in a system that your morals are being now jeopardized. You know, and it's like learning how to do the dance with the higher up of like what they're asking you to do. And now it's leading you to burnout. And then now you have to decide, I don't want to do that dance anymore. And I'm done, essentially, right? Or also, if you don't have a choice, right? Like you said earlier, is it's important to give yourself micro moments, is what I call them, throughout your day or throughout your week to take care of you. And those micro moments is the self-care, whatever that looks like for you.
I have a lot of clients who are actually therapists themselves, and in different stages. Like many of them are in the earlier stages where they just graduated and they're accruing their hours. And so we sometimes talk about how every place, right, has its thing. And so we talk about reminding ourselves or reminding themselves, right, about what is the function of this space right now. So you know, sometimes, and it kind of takes me back to when I was working in community mental health, because I think what also can happen is work culture can become toxic in the sense of like el chisme, right? So sometimes if let's imagine that it's us four at a company, right? And Vidi goes, oh, well, there's this thing that I notice and I don't like, and it's true, right? But then now we're talking to Alejandro about it, and Alejandro's like, yep, and then you're getting riled up. You come to my office and you're like, you know what, this is wrong, right? And so now we're all riled up, but we're still going to be here for now, right? Mm-hmm. And so I talked to them about, you know, being able to really look at, you know, that sort of like venting sessions that is helpful versus it being unhelpful, because sometimes it can just become draining, you know, and reminding yourself of why am I here? Because I remember that when that was happening at some point, right, I had to go, wait, hold on, you know, this place may not be good for this person anymore. Maybe they got everything that they could get out of this place and it's not the right place for them anymore. And maybe some of these things that are systemically, for sure, like it's accurate, the complaints. Maybe for me though, because at the time I was still accruing my hours, it's still worth it. You know, I still, this place, I'm still learning, you know, I like my clients, I liked my supervisor at the time. And so it's like, it's serving a purpose. And so not because all of these truths are real and this other person has said, yeah, suficiente, enough, that doesn't mean that I have to walk out too. And so it's like for everybody who's hustling, whatever hustle you're about, right? Understanding what is the function of this present moment for you, and it may be okay for right now and for you and not for somebody else, and kind of having that discernment within yourself on, is it right for me or not?
That's super important, right? Being able to kind of have that internal dialogue, right? Having that internal.
And it's hard when people are chit-chatting, right? And the things that they're saying, the tea is hot and it's real. It's hard to kind of do that, to kind of think for yourself for a second.
Yeah,
the self-awareness, right? Yeah. And the self-reflection is so important.
Yeah, mm-hmm. and I think when you layer that piece in with kind of what you shared earlier, Brandon, this thing of like, is this what I believe I am worth? Is this what I believe I'm good enough for? Like, is this my cap? Right, you know, a lot for, you know, that can limit, right, what you believe about yourself. And if you struggle with maybe some of that internal self-confidence or that belief, limiting beliefs, this may be as much as you can go in your mind, right? And without deconstructing some of that, you may think that this is all I can do, which adds more to that internal frustration and the anger and the just like the stirring up thing, right? So it's like, how can I deconstruct if that's there? But again, you only find that by looking in.
Exactly. So there's a lot of that self awareness that is important, and knowing what's yours and what's not yours. Because yeah, chisme can be hot, right?
The chisme can be good sometimes, right? Like, y'all remember the chisme back in the day? Ooh, It was
She used to
good.
be in my office all day long. I tried to go back to
Insider
your office
information.
over there.
I'd literally knock on the door, be like, "Can I sit here for a second? Like, you good?
Did you hear about what's it?
Did you hear such and such thing?"
Oh, hustle and flow.
Yeah. I guess what do we want the audience to really, or the listeners, right, to really take away from today with this concept, right? Because we talked about what is hustle in the first place, you know, what happens if we're not fully aware of what we're chasing. I mean, there's so much. We gave the tea today, but you know, what do we want? What do we want the listeners to take away and maybe even think about, kind of like their call to action?
I often reflect with my clients in individual therapy sessions of like, what is the purpose of ... And so I think that question of like, what is the purpose of your hustle is something so important, because a lot of times we're on autopilot. We just do what we saw or whatever it is, but like really signifying it and identifying what is the purpose of your hustle is really important.
What is the purpose of your hustle? Why are you hustling? What do you want to get to in this hustle? And are you being able to, along that journey, check into yourself and really measure if you are compromising yourself, moral injury, your health, or if you're able in a position where it's enough to tolerate the discomfort to go to the other side and reach that next threshold.
Is your hustle intentional? You know, are you being intentional, or I don't know, sometimes we just stay busy to avoid other things.
It's a
you know?
distraction,
So
right?
is what you're hustling and doing day to day, is it for something, or are you just staying busy? Because sometimes hustle feels good, right? Sometimes hustles, I'm busy, I'm booked and busy, and you just feel good in being able to say that. But is it actually helping you head towards the direction that you want?
Like, what's the function of the hustle, right?
The
Totally.
function.
What's the
That's
function
another.
of the hustle?
Yeah.
I think we could have a whole other episode on this, but anything else, BD?
I think the function, understanding what's the function behind it, is super important. And I would just say those micro moments, the self-care is very important along the way, to consider what that is for you in your hustle, so that you can be more in flow.
So with that, thank you everybody for tuning in today. May you think about what your hustle and flow looks like. Please subscribe and tune in on all platforms. Bye.
Bye, everyone.